No matter what, we come together for the good of our constituents, and I'm proud and honored to lead the People's House of the New York State Legislature.
The health and protection of the human beings that live in our districts is our responsibility.
Senator Douglas's words for us today, I quote, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress."
If you want equity to happen, then this is where it happens.
All of us have a responsibility to the greater good.
The House will come to order.
Good morning and welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Audrey Pitchen. We're here today with Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz. Assemblyman, thank you very much for joining us today.
Glad to be back.
Now, housing continues to be a critical issue for a lot of New Yorkers, so of course it's a big priority for both the governor and Assembly members. Can you talk a bit about what your ideas for the budget allocations for housing are?
Yes. Well, first we have to, I guess, talk about the housing emergency, or so-called housing emergency. There is, I guess we can generally agree that there's a need for more housing in New York, particularly affordable housing. Many people would characterize it as a crisis. I think it's partially caused by people. I mean, landlords, for example, have held back thousands, maybe tens of thousands of apartments that they're leaving vacant. They claim they can't afford to fix it up. Whatever the reason, there are thousands and thousands of vacant apartments, and we don't know what the true needs are. The vacancy rate supposedly is very, very low. So, as I said, I don't doubt the need for more housing. However, we have to be careful not to engage in a mad rush to just build, and essentially let developers steamroll the state into building housing on their terms. You know, they say we don't have enough housing, yet at the same time, hundreds of thousands of people in the past few years have left New York. Well, what happened to their apartments? The answer is I don't know. There is a need, though, but we got to be very careful, I guess, is what I'm saying. So the governor has proposed a few things which would increase housing, and I question two of the proposals, for example. One is to increase what's called the FAR, the floor area ratio. Basically, it would allow buildings to be bigger. And I don't know about, you know, like Manhattan, where you already have huge buildings, but in many communities, I don't think most people want bigger. And I know that developers would automatically attack anybody who disagrees with them as being NIMBY, but NIMBY isn't always bad. I don't think most of us want, 30-story buildings going up right next door to us. Why would anybody want that? So there has to be a balanced approach in terms of trying to find ways to build more housing, requiring that new housing include affordable units, and truly affordable units, not the so-called affordable units that we've seen where many people just can't afford them. So we really have to look at that carefully. Another thing that's being proposed is to essentially legalize accessory dwelling units. Those are like illegal apartments in the basement of a single-family home, for example. I think many of us remember a few years ago when we had one of the hurricanes, one of the many 100-year storms that we seem to have almost every year, that a number of people actually drowned. It was horrible in Queens because they were living in illegally converted basements in single-family homes. And so now there's a move to try to fix that. Now, the way they want to fix it is not to end the illegal use of homes, or rather to find ways to make it legal. And I kind of have mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, we do want to see if there's a way to add additional units, but on the other hand, I kind of like having some single-family homes in my community. We don't have to only have big apartment buildings. I think it's good that we have a mix, single-family, two-family, small buildings, large buildings. We have it all in the 81st Assembly District, and I would hate to see that disappear. So I don't think we should engage in a mad rush to legalize every one of these illegal apartments now. It really has to be done, if at all, on a case-by-case basis. And I don't think we should make it so easy to do. It's not always a good thing. Sometimes it may make sense, sometimes not. So in any case, those are two of the points that the governor has in her budget. I think we need to build a certain number of housing, because those things aren't going to make a really big difference anyway. There's going to be back and forth, either in the budget or after the budget, on strengthening tenant protections, on bringing back some form of the 421A program, which is a tax incentive. Some would call it a tax giveaway, but let's just call it an incentive for now, to developers to include affordable units, but to build, because they always say we can't afford to build in New York without taxpayer support. So if you're going to get taxpayer support, then give the taxpayers something back in return, and that is more affordable units. But what I don't want to see is any effort made whatsoever to roll back any part of the HSTPA. Now, what does that stand for? I never remember what it stands for, but I know what it is. And what it is the huge reform that we passed in 2019, and it was the greatest tenant protection legislation in memory. And we rolled back some of the bad things that were put into place over the previous 20 plus years before that, which includes dealing with major capital improvements and individual apartment improvements and all kinds of other stuff that allowed landlords to get enormous rent increases, undeserved rent increases, windfall profits. So I think we want to make sure that whatever we do, if we create new tax incentives, if we add new tenant protections, that we don't cut back on any of the ones that we passed a few years ago, because that's what some people want, landlords, I guess. And we can't afford to do that, because New York is so unaffordable right now, and to make that worse will just drive more working class people out of the city of New York.
Definitely. So can you speak a bit more about some of the Assembly proposals to really improve tenant protections and housing this year?
A key plank in any legislation will be what's known as good cause eviction. Now, the name is a little confusing in terms of what it does, but it essentially does two main things. And it affects apartments that are not currently rent regulated. So that'll mean free market apartments. It'll mean apartments throughout most of the state where they don't have rent protection like we do in New York City. So it'll regulate that so that people can't just be thrown out of their apartment willy-nilly because the landlord decides they don't like the person. There would have to be a legitimate reason, such as not paying your rent or causing a lot of trouble. So that's one piece of it. But the other piece of it, it would limit rent increases to a certain specified level, obviously to be negotiated. It probably wouldn't be as favorable as the type of increases that rent-stabilized tenants currently get. But the fact is, apartment rents in New York City, in particular, are so out of whack right now that the main reason people are leaving New York is not because they don't want to be in New York. It's because they can't afford to stay here. And while some property owners are making money hand over fist, they're really driving people out, and that's not what we want. We don't want to be a state that's shrinking. In the last census, we grew a lot, but as housing costs have exploded again, people are leaving, and that's not good. So good cause eviction would limit rent increases. It wouldn't prevent rent increases. It would limit it. Under the current proposal, it will be a certain amount, no more than a certain amount above the inflation rate. And I think that's very generous to landlords to have, they would still be what I consider fairly large increases. So we want to protect tenants, and we don't want tenants to just be thrown out for any reason. One of the key things in the New York tenant protection laws is the fact that tenants can't just be thrown out on the whim of a landlord for no reason. And I think that protection is really, really important. So I'm hoping that as part of a housing package this year, that some version of good cause eviction will be part of it.
Now, you mentioned a little bit about this earlier, but there have been issues with landlords sometimes sitting on rent-controlled apartments in order to not have to rent them out at what they would consider a loss. Is there any effort to combat things like that?
Well, right now, I mean, we can't force a landlord to rent an apartment out. Mm-hmm. I would think at some point it becomes unprofitable not to be collecting rent. Now, we don't know what the number is. At some point, we were told, we read that it was in several tens of thousands. I'm not sure the number is that high or not. Now, what landlords would say is that because of the changes we made in the HSTPA in 2019, that it's just not profitable for them to fix up an apartment because they can't recoup the money in a short period or at all, according to them. But I can't imagine that sitting on an empty apartment makes a lot of sense. Maybe there are other reasons why they do that. I won't even speculate. But it's certainly not good for them. It's not good for the city as a whole, and that's something that's got to change. I would hope that they would come to the wise decision that collecting rent actually is more profitable than not collecting rent. But so far, some landlords have not done that. So we'll see. But I think ultimately, if we do a housing package, everybody's going to have to give a little, get a little. Many of us are going to want the protections for tenants. I've never been a big fan of the 421A program, but I think if we're going to do something like that, it has to be in a way that we get our money's worth. If the people of the city of New York are giving up tax revenue to developers, what are we getting in return? And if it's just a bunch of luxury apartments, I don't think that's good enough. We need to get affordable apartments as well. And so I'm hoping we can come to some deal this year, which includes that plus some other stuff. I mean, that's what legislating is about. That's what compromise is about. If you want to accomplish something, you can't get 100% of what you want. Hopefully we can get as much as possible, but it probably won't be 100%.
Absolutely. And in our last moment here, can you just talk a bit about, is there anything that you're specifically hoping to push through?
Well, in the budget, I'm hoping that we can not only make sure we fund our local groups, but that we can do better for education, what the governor is proposing, because right now I don't like that proposal. And in a number of other areas, including healthcare, it's inadequate. And I think we're going to have to shift a lot of money around. And I also think there's probably more money available than what the governor is claiming at the moment. But that's what the next month and a half is about.
Absolutely. It's definitely going to be a busy month for everyone, especially the Assembly members. But thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to speaking with you in the future about some more of the issues going on with the budget.
Okay. Thank you. Good to be here again.
Good to see you as well.